Good afternoon, everyone. I do apologize for the delay. We had a loss of power. As you know, we have tornado warnings, and so I lost my power. Please do not be alarmed. We are still proceeding with the show, so just give us a few minutes. I do want to welcome everyone to CommuniTEA. This is our 6th week, episode 6, law enforcement. We have a very impactful show planned for you today. However, again, I do want to extend our apologies. It wasn't so much technology, it was more so the weather. We are under a tornado watch. So while the team gets back into the studio, because we're all broadcasting from different places, go ahead and share this broadcast. It's going to be very important for those in the Houston, Harris County communities to join us. So I'm going to bring in one of my co-hosts. I'm going to bring in Portia. She's going to start with one or two announcements, and then we'll go straight to Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez. Hi, Portia.
Hi, everybody.
So I explained to everyone that we had technology issues. The power went out. I had a strong wind come through here, and, we made do. So Portia, if you want to give us like 1 minute of announcements, and then we'll bring Sheriff Gonzalez in.
Okay. So we're all coming in slightly somber moods today. But we all know that the organization started the We Are Done Dying. I'm wearing my shirt today. The We Are Done Dying efforts initially in response to the death of Ahmaud Arbery several weeks ago. But as we all know, there was a few other highly publicized deaths over the last few weeks. So we had Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, and then on Monday, George Floyd, who was a Houston native. So we just encourage everybody to join in on the effort. You can visit the national website, naacp.org, and click the link to join the effort and take action now. I also encourage you guys to go follow the Minneapolis NAACP, a sister in arms. Leslie Redmond is the president. So she was on the front lines yesterday with some of the protests that were going on. So I encourage you guys to follow their website, their Facebook page, to find out any up-to-date details about what's going on the ground in Minneapolis. And they did release an official statement from the Minneapolis branch of the NAACP, and then also our president and CEO, Derek Johnson, also released a statement as well on behalf of the organization. So visit naacp.org to find out more information about the efforts, and then just to learn what we're doing. As always, our organization is powered by membership. So join today on a local level. Visit naacphouston.org and click the Join Us tab or Donate tab. It's $30 for the year. And if you want a deeper, stronger commitment to the organization, as I talk about every episode, you should become a Subscribing Life member. You can start today for the Subscribing Life membership at $75 and build that up over the next 10 years, paying $75 for 10 years. Or if you just want to be a member right now for 1 year, you can start your membership today, and that'll last for a year.
Okay, thank you, Portia. Yeah. I want to go ahead and get Sheriff Gonzalez in. So thank you. I'm gonna bring him on in. Hi, Sheriff Gonzalez. I don't think he can hear me. Oh, wow. Okay. One of our team members will text him to let him know that we are on. We can see him, but he evidently can't hear us. So I'm going to take him out while they get that situated. Okay, they can't hear us. Okay. Maybe their mic is on, but maybe they need to unmute their audio, if that makes sense. So we're going to figure this out with Sheriff Gonzalez. I'm going to take him out. We're going to take him out of the studio. And while Nicholas works on that. the power really just threw us off. We were ready to go. Crazy thing is we prayed against this. So the devil is really busy. So while we're figuring that out with Sheriff Gonzalez, Chief Acevedo will be on in about an hour. He's doing a press conference right now, so he'll be on in about an hour. But we want to hear from you all in the comments. I do want you to share. We are in a very difficult time right now. We all know that. So some of the things that we're going to discuss today, in addition to the shootings, because we know that is the biggest matter, we're going to also be discussing domestic violence, because that is something that is very prevalent. It does not have any regard for zip code or socioeconomic or last name. And so we just want to make sure you all understand that we're going to be talking about a myriad of issues, as well as COVID-19. We're going to talk about the jails and the number of not just those who are being held in our county jail, but also those who work in the county jail that have been affected by COVID-19. So we have a myriad of topics that we'll be discussing today. Let me see if I can get Sheriff Gonzalez. Can you hear us, Sheriff Gonzalez? It's crazy because we can see him. I think they're going to leave out and come back in, his team. I'm sure that the weather has a lot to do with it, again, because we lost our power in starting this. So, oh gosh, let's see. All right, so thank you all for joining us today again. The devil is busy. That's all I can say, because we've had this show for 6 weeks. I know it's raining, but usually I don't lose power, and I lost power today. Took out my internet and everything, and I had to wait for that to reload. So we are working on getting Ed Gonzalez's sound up so he can hear us. So our team is communicating with him in the background. Again, we thank you all for joining us. All right, Loretta, we see your comments. The chief will be on in about an hour, and we'll address that with him. He's not a lawmaker, but we will address that. So since I have you all here, I want to encourage you to utilize your city council members and hold them accountable, because they are your elected representatives and your voice here in Houston. For criminal justice, that is Abby Kamen. She is over District C, but she is over the committee that deals with criminal justice. So make sure that you're communicating these concerns. I know it's easy for us to get on social media and fuss and raise hell, but after we raise hell on social media, we got to have some next steps. So that is one of the next steps. Let's see. Sheriff Gonzalez. Still no sound. All right. So we're going to keep working on that. We're going to keep working. We're going to keep working on that. So while they're figuring out with him, we'll just keep the show rolling. I'm going to bring Portia in. I'm bringing my co-host Portia in, and we're going to talk about a few things that are going on in the community that are important for you all to be cognizant of. We're going to talk a little bit about what we had hoped to talk to Sheriff Gonzalez about. Okay, yeah. See, I can hear his sound.
Hey. Okay, so he
would need to call in to Nicholas's phone.
Hey, Bishop.
Oh, we can hear him.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna take him out. So we'll figure that out. So we're getting it, but he can't hear us. That's the problem. Okay. Portia, could you
Yes.
go ahead and go over some of those items?
Yes, I can. So I just saw a question in the comments really quick about a status on mail-in ballots. To answer your question, Ms. Kim, we, as of right now, that's on hold. There was a comment issued by the Texas Secretary of State. What is her name? Ruth Hughes has basically said at this point they're just encouraging individuals to bring their own hand sanitizer and wear masks and bring their own writing utensils. So as of right now, we're on hold with mail-in ballots other than what the original election code says, which is you're over the age of 65 to request a mail-in ballot or absentee ballot. Over the age of 65, you have a disability and or you're going to be out of the county on election day. So as of right now, per the state election laws or codes, we'll still be voting in person. The state has expanded early voting, so we can vote early June 29th through July 2nd, and then July 5th through the 10th. So there's 2 weeks of early voting, which is not typical in an election of this size or a runoff election. So they've extended the early voting period so that you can have more time to vote in person and perhaps eliminate some of the issues that we could potentially face with overcrowding at the polls. So it is an election suppression tactic, but we have to stay vigilant. So if there is individuals that fit those criteria of 65 or older, as of right now, 65 or older, have a disability or are going to be absent, and then they'll actually be using curbside voting as well. So we just encourage everyone to remain vigilant and stay safe so that you're able to vote in person. Additionally, something else, presidential candidate Joe Biden issued a statement that said the NAACP endorsed him. We're a nonpartisan organization, so we do not endorse candidates. We simply tell you, when elections are happening, what's going to be on the ballot for elections, and then where you can vote. We don't endorse any candidate. We don't tell anybody, who to vote for at all, and we don't give recommendations. So on that note, you have to make your own decision. And Joe Biden, we did not endorse him as an organization. So just some events that are happening here in the Houston area. We're doing another mass distribution and glove distribution this Saturday, May 30th at the branch. And that's being sponsored by Taft Foley, in addition to Councilwoman Carolyn Evans Shabazz and Texas State Senator Boris Miles. 12 o'clock at the branch located at 2002 Wheeler Avenue in Houston, Texas, of course, 77004 from 12 o'clock until. There's several masks. There's hundreds of masks, hundreds of gloves that we'll be distributing. So we encourage you to come out and get those supplies if you need it and share that information. So July, I think we're ready for Sheriff Gonzalez.
Yes,
Okay.
we are. Thank you so much, Portia. All right. So let me bring in Nicholas. Nicholas has Sheriff Gonzalez on his phone, and we're going to do an audio. And then I have Bishop James Dixon. So Bishop Dixon, we have Sheriff Gonzalez on the phone. Are you there, Bishop Dixon?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. And we have Sheriff Gonzalez on the phone. Good afternoon, Sheriff Gonzalez. Thank you for fighting this out with us with this technology and this tornado watch.
Oh, I know. Weather's looking bad out there, but happy to be with you.
Oh, thank you so much. So I'm gonna jump right into it, Sheriff Gonzalez. We've seen you out working in the community, but this past, I guess, 2 weeks or so, we've been wanting to hear from you and talk with you, mainly about the shooting death over in Missouri City of Joshua Johnson, I believe is his last name, 35-year-old who was shot by one of your deputies. When these things happen in our community, You know, sometimes they're caught on film, sometimes there's not body cam, and in this case, there was no body cam. Is this still presently under investigation?
Yes, it is. First of all, my condolences go out to the Johnson family on this tragedy. Anytime that we have what we consider to be an off-the-ball shooting, which this case was, we have an individual that's assigned to what's known as the Gulf Coast Violent Offenders Task Force. He was conducting an investigation in the neighborhood when this tragedy unfolded. And we have multiple independent investigations that take place. One is what we call a criminal investigation, which is basically, was there any criminal activity on the part of our personnel, or what exactly happened? And then we have a civilian, not a civilian, but an administrative investigation by our Internal Affairs Division. That's an independent one to kind of see were policies followed, did we follow standard operating procedures, those type of things. And then the district attorney also conducts an investigation to see if there was any wrongdoing on the part of the law enforcement officer. And then separately, but also independent, is the forensic investigation by the Institute of Forensic Sciences that looks at what the exact cause of death was, trajectory of bullets, all those kind of things. And so, we really understand the importance of having transparency, to making sure it's a thorough investigation, that no stone is left unturned. At the conclusion of all those different investigations, it's referred to the district attorney's office, where a grand jury will review the facts of the case and determine what charges, if any, are applicable or not, and all that is conducted. So it's important that there be a full account of exactly what happened, because we do believe in public trust. We know it's important, and if there needs to be accountability, then we're prepared to do that as well, of our own personnel, of our agency, or whatever needs to be done.
Very good. July, did you have another question? There she is.
I apologize. Trying to see if Bishop Dixon, his device isn't connected. Thank you for that response, Sheriff. We do appreciate it. So while Bishop Dixon is getting his sound and everything together, I think everyone really got messed up with the storm. Mm-hmm. I know one of the things that Nicholas had mentioned when he booked you a while ago was about the domestic violence that's happening in Harris County. Can you give us kind of a picture of what you all are seeing out in the community? And I'm going to come off screen so I can assist Bishop Dixon with getting on screen.
Okay. Domestic violence is on the upswing. When we started really, getting into the heart of the pandemic, I mentioned that I had concern that we were going to see increased domestic violence because everybody kind of had to stay at home, to avoid community spread. And for many, unfortunately, that means having to lay up with their abusers. That was problematic. In addition, many times domestic violence is only made worse because there's increased stressors such as unemployment, financial strain, evictions, those type of concerns. And so it just ratchets up the stress. And we knew that there was going to be an increased domestic violence occurring in our communities, and we're seeing that. A couple years back, we were concerned because we saw that the homicides that we investigated, 44% or almost half, were somehow connected to domestic violence. And even now, a significant number of the murders that we've seen this year so far in unincorporated Harris County have had some involvement with domestic violence. So it's something that really knows no boundaries. It impacts all communities, all socioeconomic conditions, from rich to poor. And it's something that sometimes is learned behavior or is learned behavior to be abusive, and it's something that we really need to continue to work on, not only here locally but nationally as well. It's a national epidemic of people dying at the hands of somebody that's supposed to love them and care for them, and that's sad. But we have seen an uptick in domestic violence at the Harris County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Sheriff. And while they're waiting to get everything acclimated, I think they're about to come in now. Bishop Dixon, can you hear me? Bishop Dixon?
She's probably just gonna come back to you verbally.
Sweet. Okay, so I hear that. So he heard us.
See, I can't hear anything.
Bishop Dixon, can you hear me? While they're waiting to okay, there we go. July, you got Bishop Dixon on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
I can't hear you all though.
Yes, we hear you.
I can't hear you all.
You can?
No.
Bishop Dixon, go ahead.
Now I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. And is my face on the screen yet? I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
but just go ahead. It's okay.
All right. So, Sheriff, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate the opportunity to dialogue with you today. I know one of the other areas that you've been concerned with is can you hear me?
Now we can.
I can't hear the sheriff. Is he there?
He's
Bishop, you have to speak up louder.
All right. Can the sheriff hear me now?
I can hear you.
He hears you, Bishop.
July, can you hear me?
I can hear the
Okay.
bishop.
Let me ask the sheriff another question. Sheriff, you've been quite engaged in criminal justice reform and more specifically, bail reform in Harris County. And I know there are plenty of questions regarding that. Talk about why you've been so passionate about implementing bail reform in the Harris County jail system.
Thank you very much, Bishop. It's an important issue. I know one that we're grappling with here locally in Harris County, and I think it's one that we really need some thoughtful dialogue going on around this issue. Generally speaking, I believe we can't incarcerate our way out of dealing with crime or issues in the community. I think that this country for too long has depended on mass incarceration. And I think we have to look deeper. We have to look at root causes if we really want to make an impact on public safety. Currently today, I operate one of the largest jail systems in the country, the largest one in the state. I have over 8,000 individuals right now that are detained inside our Harris County jail. I don't decide who's in or out. I just simply am responsible for housing and providing care and custody for these individuals. In a situation like a pandemic, it makes it even worse because we're not able to separate successfully over 8,000 individuals. Yet that's what every day we preach to the community to say, please maintain social distance. Please, keep separation. We're not able to do that in the jail system. It's important to note that of the 8,000 people that I currently have detained, over 6,400 are pretrial individuals, meaning they haven't yet been convicted. They haven't been convicted yet. They've only been accused of a crime. And I think especially for communities of color, something that should be of great importance to all of us is that as we speak today, 50% of the individuals that are incarcerated in our jail are Black males. 50%. Another 23% are Latino, meaning that about 75% come from communities of color. Now, I'm not speaking to guilt or innocence. That's a separate phase. I'm talking just about pretrial detention. And we have to understand that the American system calls for the release of individuals under pretrial basis. And for too long, we were simply dependent on cash. Basically, if you had money, you were able to get out of jail, and if you didn't, you stay in jail. And so a federal judge ruled in the O'Donnell case that was litigated here in Harris County that was an unconstitutional way of doing business, that we had to look at other things. I think what's happened, though, is that we have to find the right balance. We have to make sure that we're truly looking at risk. We have to protect the community. We got to make sure that individuals aren't coming out with multiple bonds or continuing to reoffend where there's no repercussion. We also have to make sure that the wheels of justice are moving. Today, we found out from the state that all in-person jury trials have been suspended until August. This is a directive from the state, meaning that until August, if you're waiting for trial, you're going to wait in jail at least till August. Well, for many, that's going to be a death sentence because they're in here with a lot of pre-existing medical conditions. We have a lot of sick people. In our population today, I have 982 people that are between the ages of 46 and 65, 46 to 55. I have 478 that are between 56 and 65 years of age, and I have 82 individuals that are 66 years and over. These individuals are highly vulnerable because they're in a jail setting. There's not a lot of social distancing at all. And then they already have a pre-existing condition, meaning that for those individuals, it really can become a death sentence to them, and they could literally die in jail while they're awaiting trial. And this is something that's not only a jail system, this is a criminal justice system. And so it's something that we've got to be smart and responsible, where we look at safe ways of releasing people that are little or no threat to the community, while we do a better job of maintaining those in jail that really need to be in jail. But for too long, we have the opposite. We have the more violent people that are able to get out of jail, and the people that are less violent stay in jail. And I say that this day and age, law enforcement is in the front lines of three important issues: poverty, mental illness, and addiction. And we should have a role in being problem solver to that, but we should not have a primary role where we primarily use jail as the only tool to resolve some of these issues.
That was me. That was my comment that came in delayed.
Bishop Dixon. Bishop Dixon?
Yes.
Did you have another question for Sheriff Gonzalez?
Yes. One follow-up.
Okay. And then we'll take some from the audience.
So Sheriff, let me thank you for that explanation. But let me ask, in this COVID-19 environment, you have, I think, roughly 7,500 inmates in jail, and how many of those inmates in jail, of the 7,500, are unable to get commissary on their books? What is the state of the jail right now in the COVID-19 environment that's different than the state of the jail pre-COVID-19?
Yeah, a couple things have impacted our operations. Early on, we had to shut down visitation because, we obviously, with 8,000 people currently in our custody, we have a lot of family members, other folks that come in. As you know, we operate in tight quarters, small elevators, so it would be physically impossible to allow visitation to occur. So that puts a big strain on the relationships that exist. It puts more tension and stress, more anxiety. With people being out of work, many times they would supplement their loved ones' commissary funds so that they could buy some extra goods, just things that make them a little bit more comfortable. Right now, that's decreased a lot. They simply don't have the money to be depositing in their loved ones' commissary accounts. We advocated and worked with Commissioner's Court to get some free phone calls. Initially, the company provided 2. We were able to expand that to 5 free calls per week. so that they can at least maintain some phone contact. Also, one of the issues that I'm personally passionate about is that we did a study my first year in office 3 years ago, and we found out that 90,000 children every year have a parent that's incarcerated in jail. So that's the impact of incarceration is so profound on communities. And like I said earlier with the statistics, especially communities of color, when you've had a loved one that's been justice involved, it's very likely that that child's going to grow up to also be justice involved. So I want to break that cycle. I want to make sure that we make sure that the individuals, the vast majority of them, are going to return to their community, that they can come out and have better opportunities. In the past, we've had one of the largest inmate education programs in the country. We partner with Houston Community College to provide different training and other certificate programs. Right now, those are suspended simply because the education partners have also closed right now. So all those have provided a big hardship on our operation. We also have a large population that's fairly young. We have over 3,000, no, almost 4,000 individuals that are between 19 to 35 years of age. On those younger ones, we would often engage with 2 educators that are here with HISD that provide them credit recovery, classes, those type of things. Those classes have been temporarily suspended as well, simply because of the COVID concerns. So it really has put a big impact on our operation. With that said, our infection rate is going down. We do have 2 individuals that are hospitalized right now. One is critical, related to COVID. We have 21 total that are hospitalized, but 19 of those are non-COVID. Like I said, we have a lot of sick individuals that come in with a lot of bad illnesses to begin with, like cancers, diabetes, heart disease, and all of that. And so, but in terms of the infection numbers, those are slowly going down. We also work with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee to provide more testing. We were able to do that early on. We're now testing approximately 30% of our population because, unlike other systems, we would rather know who's infected so we can give them the best care possible instead of just letting them stay sick and we don't test them and just pretend like we never had a high infection rate. We'd rather know, and so we could treat them better. And Bishop, also a personal shout out to you. You took the lead in helping coordinate a food drive for including families that have loved ones that are incarcerated, because we know that they have the extra hardship not only of being maybe unemployed or underemployed right now, but also having someone that's incarcerated. So Community Faith always stepped up to help the Northwest community and others out there, and want to thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you, Sheriff. Bishop Dixon, you have anything else? Bishop Dixon? Let's see. There we go.
He as y'all can hear the thunder, I think he's having technology problems. I'm texting with him to see where he is. Thank you, Sheriff Gonzalez. I know Bishop Dixon did have another question. Bishop Dixon, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you well now.
Okay, could you go on with that last question for Sheriff Gonzalez, and then we'll try to take 1 or 2 from the comments?
No, I think we need to I've got it. I think the weather's caused quite a bit of delay. I simply want to say thank you to the sheriff for that, and I think he addressed most of the questions. Let's open it up to the audience, please.
I can do that for you. All right, so we have a couple of questions. I'm gonna go back to the top. Okay, they did mail in. That's not Bishop. Okay, so this question is from Missouri City for Sheriff Gonzalez. This is Anthony from Missouri City here. Wonder if you can shed some light on Representative Al Green's call for a court of inquiry into the killing of Joshua Johnson here in Mo City. Would that help make a fair investigation? If so, why don't we do that more often?
Thank you for the question. We definitely have a lot of respect for the congressman. He's been an amazing, or is a wonderful public servant, and I trust his perspective a great deal. I think in this circumstance, I think it's important to first gather some facts, make sure that we're getting all the information together. I feel personally that as we've shown before, we're capable of leading fair investigations. We've held people accountable when needed, and we don't have any intention of ever, covering anything up or anything like that. There's multiple independent investigations that go on, and in the end, all the facts are presented to the district attorney's office for full review and review by a grand jury. So I feel that there's a lot of things in place already for a fair investigation to take place. If not, we ourselves would pursue more independent inquiries. But if a court or some other entity decides that it's the best option, then we're always open to that. In this case, we feel that that there could be an independent investigation. We want and understand transparency, and we feel that that we're heading in the right course to make sure that we gather the facts along with the DA's office, and then have a fair investigation and let the outcome be based on the facts of the case. I wish I could talk more, unfortunately, because the case is ongoing. I can't personally say more about it, but I do respect his request and inquiry, and we'll just continue to work through the process as we always do to make sure there's a full account of the facts for everyone.
Thank you for that, Sheriff Gonzalez, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We do have our next guest in studio. Would you be willing to come back and join us for more conversation around these issues on a day when the weather isn't so bad?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Always open to it. Have a great deal of love and respect for Yolanda Smith, and then with all of you and Bishop Dixon and everyone. So very grateful for all the work of the NAACP, such a historic organization, and all the tremendous work that goes on. So I'm always available for a phone call or visit with you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
All right, Bishop Dixon, if you can hear me, I'm bringing in Captain Jonathan Zitzman from Precinct 4. Hi, Captain. Can you unmute your mic?
I can hear.
Captain Zitzman, can you unmute your mic? There we go. If you can hear me. Hi. How are you? Can you hear me?
Nope.
Captain Zitzman, can you hear me? Oh, wow. Can you call him, Nick?
No, I can't hear. Can y'all hear me? Mic check, mic check.
Yes, we can hear you. Unmute.
I can hear somebody in the background. Maybe the bishop.
Yes.
Bishop.
Good afternoon. How you doing, Captain?
Hey, doing good, sir. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. Good to have you on this afternoon.
Oh, so happy to be here.
Welcome to the conversation, and we appreciate your time today on this rainy evening in Houston. Before we get into any substantive questions, tell us where Precinct 4 is, the general area that your precinct covers.
Sure, no, absolutely. Precinct 4 is led by Constable Mark Herman. I'm here today on his behalf. Precinct 4 covers primarily all of North Harris County. We cover the 520 square miles that range from 290 out west up to the Montgomery County line up north, all the way out to Lake Houston out east, and roughly the Beltway down south. And within those 520 square miles, we serve about a little over 1 million citizens.
Wow. And Captain, how long have you been with with Precinct 4?
I've been here for 5 years, and previously I served as an assistant chief of police at a small town between here and Dallas before moving back home here to Harris County and joining the constable's office.
Very good. We are glad to have you. Let's talk about some of the things that constables do. I know people tend to wonder, what do the constables do versus Harris County Sheriff's Department, and why is it important to have constables in addition to sheriffs, deputies in the sheriff's office? Can you talk about the distinctions and what specifically the constable's office does that's different than the sheriff's department?
Absolutely. No, I'm more than happy to. So as the sheriff's office, they are the primary law enforcement agency of the county. And there is one single sheriff versus 8 elected constables here in Harris County. And here in Harris County, it's a little bit different from other counties where you will find constable offices. So here in Harris County and all throughout Texas, it is the constable's office responsibility to process all paperwork, all process, all warrants, all orders from the justice court system. And that is our primary responsibility, where the sheriff's office primary responsibility is the jail. That's the biggest thing that is the distinction between the two agencies. However, here in Harris County, the constable agencies over the past few decades has really cemented themselves as an important component to the law enforcement system. And what we pride ourselves here at the Precinct 4 Constable's Office is we consider ourselves the closest form of law enforcement to the community. And that's just because of how we're structured. You know, our constables are elected on the precinct level, and we are very heavily involved in what is called the contract policing program, which means we partner up with various homeowners associations and utility districts to provide those specific areas with law enforcement services. And that really gives us the opportunity to establish relationships on a neighborhood level instead of such a large level that a large city and a large county has to have to deal with. So for us, we really pride ourselves in having the opportunity to be the closest form of law enforcement to the community. And through that, we provide all emergency and non-emergency calls for service. Some criminal investigations, obviously not to the same scale that the sheriff's office does, but we're also very fortunate to have a wonderful working relationship with Sheriff Gonzalez and the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and we're great partners, and we look forward. We're very optimistic about the relationship we have with them.
Thank you, Captain Zitzman. I apologize. It looks like Bishop Dixon may have gotten knocked out. Let's see if I can get him
back. Hope I don't lose you.
Bishop? Okay.
Hey, Bishop, are you there?
I think we lost him. Captain, I have a question while we wait for him. Can you talk about the type of calls that you've seen during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Texas, I'm back on.
Bishop Dixon, are you there?
Can you don't, that's in your number?
Bishop Dixon?
I know, but I can't.
Bishop Dixon? Okay. Can you hear me, Captain Zitzman? I don't think he can hear me, guys. Bishop
Hello?
Dixon, are you there?
Hey, Bishop, I can hear you now.
Hello?
Go ahead, Bishop.
No, I cannot.
July, nod if you can hear me, because I can see you.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Bishop, I can hear you. Might have a slight delay, but
Captain,
I'm not able to hear Julie.
Can you tell us in the Constable's Precinct 4, what are some
Well, I know one
prevalent
thing that is
crimes
kind of been
that you have
a
to address at
hot
the
topic
community
here
level?
is how law enforcement agencies are handling the COVID-19. And I know the Precinct 4 Constable's Office has had to make several steps in response to COVID-19. And feel free, if there's a question, feel free to ask that in the chat if the audio is not working. But the Precinct 4 Constable's Office had to take many steps, as did every other law enforcement agency, to kind of to deal with this pandemic. And the most important thing that we did was follow the guidelines provided by our local, state, and federal partners and leaders. And that did create some barriers and some obstacles for our office. We really had to figure out a way to navigate providing law enforcement service and also minimize exposure to our deputies and also exposure to the public. So one of the things we did was try to prevent as many unnecessary or close quarter exposure as possible. One of the steps we took was minimizing some of the traffic enforcement that was done and just trying to focus on the most egregious traffic offenders. So we were minimizing some of unnecessary exposure through there. Additionally, we had protocols that, when feasible, anybody who called us, called police, if it was feasible, we asked that the residents or people inside a home or apartment can step out and speak to law enforcement instead of talking inside. But obviously, just the nature of the business, that's not always possible. We also did some community partnerships as well. We partnered with the Houston Food Bank to assist with food drives out off of 290 in the Cypress area. Those were very successful, and it was a wonderful service provided by the Houston Food Bank. Additionally, I know we all received the order from Harris County to wear masks. And we really took an education and awareness approach to that. And when we came into contact with individuals who did not have a mask or could not get access to a mask, we authorized our deputies to be able to provide those in need with some masks to prevent themselves from potential exposure, or if they had symptoms or they're asymptomatic, to minimize exposure as well. But the biggest thing we had to give consideration was we had to ensure we had enough boots on the ground to be able to provide the law enforcement service and to respond to non-emergency and emergency calls for service. And if we increased the number of deputies being quarantined and out with COVID-19, we could really risk not being able to provide the bare necessities that are required by a law enforcement agency. Thankfully, our office had, I believe it was 6 positive COVID-19 cases, even more so. Thankful that none of the cases were serious. I know that the sheriff's office lost one of their own due to COVID-19. It's a terrible tragedy. Our thoughts and our prayers are with that sergeant's family and the Harris County Sheriff's Office. But we were fortunate none of our cases were very serious. And after the quarantine and a couple negative tests, all those deputies returned to work. I did have one question here. What actions, in case the public can't see the questions, what actions has your office taken to help navigate domestic violence and child abuse cases during this pandemic, as many families are sheltering in place? Excellent question. So during this pandemic, our call volume hasn't really decreased. It's just been the type of calls that we are receiving, and domestic violence is one of those things that certainly spiked, and we saw an increase. And I think a lot of people kind of just simply chalk that up to cabin fever and people kind of going stir crazy. But domestic violence is significantly more of a threat than that. And when people aren't able to leave the home, people aren't able to reach out for help. When people have less avenues to ask for assistance, that causes pretty significant issues. So, in addition to just responding to domestic violence calls for service, we also increased our victims assistance services and made some proactive phone calls out to community members that have had domestic violence issues in the past. Additionally, in terms of child abuse cases, I know we do partner with the sheriff's office, and we have an investigator embedded in their crimes against children division. And while it's very unfortunate that we do see a spike in these things, we do ensure that not only do we work to remove the offender from the situation, but we work to provide as many services to the victims as well.
Bishop Dixon. Bishop Dixon.
I'm here.
Okay. Can you go ahead with the next question for the captain? The final question?
Yes, final question, Captain. As it relates to the demographics of Precinct 4, do you have very much in terms of police shootings and those kinds of issues, we know that this is an issue around our county now, particularly in Harris County, Houston, and then around the nation. What specific training happens in Precinct 4 to try to de-escalate uh, street scenes from becoming violent? And how many issues do you think you have per year that involve police shootings cases?
No, that's an excellent question. And so all of our deputies are required to go through the same basic training that every law enforcement officer in the state of Texas has to go through. But additionally, for our office, we require all of our deputies to go through certain mental health training to better know how to respond to crisis type incidents that involve mental health. Our deputies are also required to go through de-escalation training that really provides deputies a different perspective on how to respond to a situation. Where 20 years ago, it may have been common practice to respond with violence, when nowadays, deputies have another tool in their toolbox they can use to respond to some heightened situations. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but we've averaged about one officer involved shooting a year over the past 5 or 6 years. But one thing we make it a point to do is try to be as transparent as possible. Several months ago, we had an officer-involved shooting that took place near I-45 in the Cypresswood area, and within 24 hours, we had released the footage from our body cameras about what took place. We put out statements about what took place, and we want to have an open and transparent investigation as much as we possibly can, without compromising the investigation. But all of our deputies are put through those vital trainings, so they can really rely on deadly force as a last case scenario option.
Thank you so much, Captain Zitzman. Can you hear me? I want to tell him thank you.
Thank you, Captain, very much.
Thank you, Bishop.
All right, and we hope to have you back. You all to come back and join us from Precinct 4.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to the Houston NAACP Community Coordination Committee. Thank you, Nicholas, for getting everything organized and communicated with us. And we're always here for you. If you ever need anything at all, please let us know. More than happy to participate in any conversations in the future. And please let us know if you need anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Bishop, we're going to bring in Nicholas. He has Constable Alan Rosen on the line.
Hi, how are y'all?
Hi, Constable Rosen.
Good evening, Constable. How are you?
I'm doing. How are you?
Doing great, my brother. Good to hear your voice.
Well, I'm sure that y'all have heard by now, because the news broke today that I am COVID positive, and I have got this. I'm on my 9th day, so I am healing every day and feeling good, actually.
Well, Constable, we're praying for you and praying for your complete total recovery.
Thank you so much, Bishop. You doing okay, my brother?
We're doing well, and thank you for being willing to be on this call even while you are going through that particular crisis yourself. That means a lot as a public servant.
Well, that's what I love more than anything that I do, is being a public servant. So it's I'm happy to do it always.
Well, thank you. We won't keep you on too long. Let me just ask you a couple of questions. First of all, tell us how long you've been Constable of Precinct 1.
I've been Constable Precinct 1 since 2013, January 1st. And I have been, I call myself a public servant, not a politician. So I'm very much into serving the public and making sure that we do everything we can to improve our relationship and do things that are beneficial to everybody in the community.
But Constable, give us some idea for those who are unfamiliar of the territory that that Precinct 1 covers, so people have an idea where you serve.
Yeah, so Precinct 1 is the second largest constable's office in the United States. We are the most diverse constable's office in the United States, and I'm very proud of that. And we serve a mixture of communities, from the most impoverished communities to the most wealthiest of communities, and all in between. So we take in areas like Acres Homes and Cashmere Gardens, Independent Heights, Oak Forest, Montrose, River Oaks, Heights, Bel Air, West University, Southside Place. So it's a very, very diverse community that Precinct 1 is in charge of.
And Constable, a wide range of constituents and citizens that you serve. How diverse is your staff at Precinct 1?
Oh, we're about 66% minority majority. So about 66% of our entire workforce, all the way through the top rank, all the way down to the bottom ranks, is diverse. So I'm very proud of that. Our precinct very much mirrors the community that we serve, and that was done by design.
But you hear that you're done by design. Explain why that's important, because in so many instances where we see confrontations between law enforcement and people on the streets and in the communities, there are difficulties and gaps in terms of communication, understanding, and translation. And because of that, people get mislabeled and profiled. Why is it important that to you, by design, that your staff mirrors the demographics of the community?
Because I think all communities have to be represented and have a seat at the table. And I think that you have got to have a precinct that just mirrors the community that we serve. Certain people feel more comfortable with other people and vice versa. And so you always have to have a nice group of people that respects and understands each other's community and all the different things that go on in the community. And I think if we got to know each other on a much deeper level, community-wise and law enforcement-wise, I think a lot of the friction would go away. And it's just a matter of law enforcement officials. I
lost it.
Something happened with Nicholas's feed, who had Constable Rosen on. This has been such an interesting broadcast. Thank y'all for being patient with us. We know we had a question about Precinct 1 arrest being made that was up next. Bishop Dixon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay. I'm gonna bring Nick back in so he can Constable Rosen can finish your question.
Sorry, Constable, we linked out for a second.
Thank you.
Okay. Are y'all waiting on me?
Oh, we're back on?
Yes, sir.
We're back on. Constable?
Okay. So I mean, I left off basically that it's so important for us to have members of our department mirror that of the community, because we need to have a different perspective throughout and learn from each other on the different cultural things that go on and different ways for us to learn from each other and get to know each other on a much more personal level versus, just policing a neighborhood. It's always nice to have somebody that knows people in the neighborhood in which they police and really build that bond between the community and the law enforcement people that are out there in the neighborhoods.
Constable, let me ask you this. When you look at situations like going on in Houston, as well as other parts of America, shooting of George Floyd that's just happened in Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. Give us your perspective on that from a law enforcement perspective, and how you communicate within your department regarding these kinds of incidents.
Well, obviously, you've got to have a properly trained, force. And, we deal with things like in our department, like with, implicit bias training. cultural diversity training and things of that nature. I mean, I was very, very unhappy to see what took place, with Mr. Floyd, and my prayers are with his family. It was from the video I've seen, it was grossly inappropriate, and I'm saddened by it. I really am saddened by it. And so, what we can do, and what I can do as a leader, is make sure that I get to see what the public wants to see. And so I make sure that every one of my vehicles has audio and video recording going on, that every one of my officers that are out on the street has a body camera that's going on, and I have my supervisors routinely audit every officer in the department, not because of a complaint, not because somebody called and complained and said this officer was rude or something, but proactively make sure that the officers are doing and acting consistent with being a professional. And we look for things like that. And of course, you always try to figure that out in the hiring process. But if in case it got missed in the hiring process somehow, we have all these other mechanisms in my office that make sure that we're able to find an officer who may not be acting consistent with policy and training and treating the public with respect. And people that know me know that I'm not going to tolerate anything less than that.
Constable Rosen, if I may also add.
Let me ask you one other question before we get.
Go ahead, Bishop. Go ahead, Bishop.
Yes, let me get one other question before. And I'm sorry about the Nicholas.
Go ahead.
Your department has also focused on an area in our city and county that many people don't really underestimate and are not well informed of, and that's this area of sex and human trafficking. And let's talk about that. Talk about your agency's perspective on the need to really work towards alleviating that as a scourge in our community from a law enforcement's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, and we're really focused on children in that space as well, more than probably anything. Is there are so many children that are being exploited out there, and often children are very difficult sometimes to communicate criminal things with. In other words, if somebody's mistreated them or somebody's harmed them or sexually assaulted them or human trafficked them, it's very difficult to gain the trust of these children to come forward and let us hold somebody accountable for that. And so we are investing a lot of time, money, and resources in trying to ensure that those children have a voice, that they are heard, and somebody does take them very serious when there's an outcry. And, we've had about a 19% increase year over year of children coming forward about being possibly human trafficked and things like that. So we are spending an enormous amount of time because children need more help than any other demographic in our society. Yeah. And so we're doing our part to make sure that we educate people, that we help investigate crimes that happen against children, and work with our community partners to really put a stick in that, prevent that from happening, and prevent it from happening to any of our children.
Well, we can appreciate that, Constable. And Nicholas, you have a question?
I did. One of the viewers wanted. I had a question, Constable Rosen, for you, and the question was, what do you know about how many, what is the rate or the percentage of people who are arrested in Precinct 1?
I don't have a percentage of people who are arrested in Precinct 1 as a number.
Yes, sir.
I certainly wouldn't know that right off the top of my head. I can tell you that I have watched every week during this pandemic of all calls for service for all of Harris County, so all the unincorporated, and the constable's offices. And we have seen, which we thought there really hadn't been a spike in crimes, and there hadn't been a spike in domestic violence calls and things like that. In fact, the numbers have gone down. What I would caution everybody on is that as families and as people become more desperate during these times financially, and they become more worried about just survival, every day, that that there's a potential for crime to go up, more property crime than violent crimes. Although the city has seen a violent crime, the murder rate is up in the city of Houston. But so we're not in Harris County. We have not seen a huge spike or anything like that, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And but we do have to be very vigilant on making sure that people that are suffering, that we make sure we get those resources to them, so that they don't have a need of having that going into that survival mode. And so we got to make sure that we do our part to ensure that doesn't happen.
Well, Carson, we appreciate that answer as well. Nicholas, any questions from the audience that I'm not able to read?
Let's see.
You know, I'll wait while y'all are doing that. I do always like to point out, you know, Precinct 1 is probably one of the best law enforcement agencies in town when it comes to actually doing stuff with the community. I pride ourselves so much on that. And so, you know, we were one of the first agencies to give out gloves and masks, and we chose those neighborhoods that were the highest impacted by COVID-19. So we picked the neighborhoods and the zip codes that, and they were in historically underprivileged areas that were impacted the most. And so we immediately went out and started giving away the mask and the food and the gloves and everything to those impacted neighborhoods as well. And so I say that only because that's part of our job too, is not just to put people in jail and not to arrest people, but to also do those things that are beneficial to the community as well. And I'm very proud of that work because that's another way that we are able to distinguish ourselves as a law enforcement agencies that's there to kind of protect people as opposed to, you know, anything else.
Constable, along those lines, you have your annual youth event that takes place every September, I think it is.
Yes, sir.
Talk about why you do that, and I know you spend an enormous amount of resource to put that sort of thing together. Talk about the event, how many kids come, and why it is that you continue to do that kind of work as a law enforcement agency.
Yeah, we do 2 big events a year, which we are, and it's totally designed to engage kids. And one is we have a basketball tournament every year that we give away, you know, backpacks and school supplies and haircuts. And we also have a big time basketball tournament where the kids actually play against law enforcement officers, and they just get to know them on a much deeper level. And Bishop, I know that you and your church have always sent a whole group of kids, and you've always participated with us. And I can't thank you enough for that and your leadership for that. And I can tell you that that's one facet that we do every year. We feed every kid. We make sure that they have everything, and we bond more. Most importantly, we bond. Then we have a teen leadership summit that we do every year, and we bring in faith-based leaders. We bring in law enforcement. We bring in prosecutors, judges, defense lawyers, social workers, and we talk about our relationship. So the kids actually get to ask all of those important questions that they need to ask about law enforcement and otherwise, and we dialogue about our relationship and figure out ways to improve that relationship. And I think that is probably the greatest work that I do, is making sure that we have these outlets for kids to ask questions and get to know law enforcement on a much deeper level. The last place I want to get to know a kid for the first time is when we show up at a door and they've never met us before. So we do a lot of things to network and make sure that the kids get to know us on a much more personal level, so that if we ever have to interact, there is this level of respect for each other, and we're more friends than we are anything else. So we make sure that we do those minimum of 2 events a year to really engage our kids.
Thank you for that, Constable Rosen. We appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us today, considering all that you're facing personally. We do hope that you'll come back and join us. We do believe that CommuniTEA, this show, this broadcast, is here to stay beyond this pandemic. So thank you for taking the time to join us today.
I can't thank you enough for having me. I think it's an important dialogue that we need to keep doing. And Bishop, I love you, brother, and there's not a darn thing you can do about it.
Thank you
Y'all
so
take
much.
care. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks, Constable Rosen.
You. All right. I believe Bishop is resetting. We're going to bring in Chief Art Acevedo to join us. Nicholas, if you want to introduce the chief while we get Bishop Dixon AV now that the weather is clearing up.
Hey, Chief. He's on. Can you hear us? I think you're on mute.
Hi.
Hey, Chief. How are we doing today? Thank you so much for being on our broadcast.
Hey, honored to be here. Thank you for your work and for inviting us.
Thank you, sir. So, Chief Acevedo, I've had the privilege and the pleasure of coming across you on many wonderful occasions. You're a great guy. And if you don't mind, just tell us, a little bit about yourself and how long have you been police chief here in Houston, and what are some of your goals for the department?
Well, I've been here for 3.5 years when they offered me a job back in the beginning of November of 2016, and I swore in at the end of November in 2016, and we haven't looked back. I think our goal is to try to make the Houston Police Department the best big city police department in the country, and one that is completely committed to the tenets of relational policing, which goes beyond community policing, because relational policing is about every contact being the beginning of a relationship, and I think we're on our way. The work never ends, but I'm very happy so far with how far along we've come as an organization.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I do want to ask this. What are some of the things that your department has participated in the communities since the, I guess we would say the precursor to the beginning of COVID-19? Because you guys have been out pretty actively. So,
first of all, we're all very touching people. I mean, Latinos and, African-American community, we're huggers. We like to connect. And COVID-19 is absolutely not only killing us from the virus, but it's killing us emotionally and there's so much stress across the nation and the city and the county. But you know what? From day one, I've made it real clear to my people that we're going to participate in all activities. I'll never forget the first time I went to Juneteenth. Mayor Turner looked at me and said, "Wow, I'd only been here, 6 months." And he saw our entire command staff there.
Right.
Because it sends a very powerful message, one. And two, our people need to see just the tremendous support and love the community has for them. And never confuse with when communities speak out against bad policing, never confuse that with their strong support for good policing. And so whether it's that, our command staff's going to the Pride Parade that they've never done before. I looked around and said, "Hey, where's our Police Activities League?" And they told me, "Well, they got rid of it 18 years ago." Now, how are we going to better serve kids and build trust if we're not meeting these kids outside of the 911 call loop, right? When families are in crisis or bad situations happening. So we've brought back the Police Activities League, and that's having a huge effect. And the TAP program with Dr. Penn and the TAP program and our Explorer program and our Youth Police Advisory Council that we have. It's a lot of, I don't see it as work. I see it, it's a labor of love and something that we need to continue to build on.
Right. Mr. Dixon, are you on? We had another co-host that's coming on as well. Until you get squared away, I guess I can also ask you this. Wait, here we go. Everybody's in.
Go ahead and finish your question.
Go
ahead and finish your question.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chief. How are you?
Hi, Doc. How are you, Dr. Dixon?
I'm doing great. Great.
I don't know if you call you Doctor, Reverend, Bishop.
I think Nick had a question to get started.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nick. Finish your question. I'm sorry.
Very good. So I was going to ask Chief again about one thing I really look at because I come from a law enforcement background. My grandfather was the first black police officer in my community in 1959 in South Carolina. So
Wow.
yeah, right. So I look at
Stories to tell.
so I look at community policing and I look at how things are going on in Houston and with the culture that's happening in our community lately with the officer involved shootings. How can you collaborate or how can you get our community to understand that there's not the police against the community, but how can we better work together and coordinate with each other, even though we've had these officer involved shootings?
Yeah, that's a good question. And is Grandpa still alive?
No, he's deceased.
Too bad. I would love to have had lunch with him. And trailblazers like that forged the way for a lot of people after them. And so may he rest in peace. But, we've had 6 officer involved shootings in short succession. In a very short period of time.
Yes, sir.
We don't want to lose sight of the fact that we've actually reduced them in over 50% and that we're in a much better place. Having said that, I think it's important for the community to know that as we're investigating these, 2 things are happening. One, we're investigating it not to just determine the lawfulness of the use of force or the response by the officer from a legal and criminal perspective and administrative perspective, but we're also taking a deep look to see what can we have done differently or better, regardless of whether it's justified or not, to maximize the potential for there not to be a loss of life. And so that process is ongoing. And the other piece is that, there's a lot of debate about the videos, right? The body worn camera videos, is that it's kind of like our gospel singer, Pastor Audric Medeiros, that not all families, that man by all counts was a wonderful human being. And that night, like I tried to say to the paper and to the community, that does not define who he was. That moment in time is it's a grain of sand in a huge sand bottle that represented his life. And I remember telling the community I had not connected yet with Mr. Medeiros' family, and I finally got to talk to his brother after the press conference on that Monday where I updated the community. And I remember saying, people shouldn't assume that families of suspects or subjects that are deceased out of an encounter with the police necessarily want the video to be out there for eternity on cyberspace. And, we were able to visit with Adrian for 3 hours. You got to see all the videos that we had, and thank God for the ADT business videos, because the body worn camera got knocked off. He was able to actually visit for 3 hours, look at all the videos, ask all the questions he wanted to ask. It's like I told him, there's nothing I'm going to tell him there that I wouldn't say under oath in a criminal proceeding or in a civil proceeding. Mm-hmm. And that was over, at least for now. Adrian, the middle brother of Audric, who lost his life and was buried last Friday up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, has asked us not to release it. And so I just ask the community, please be patient. There's a lot of things we have to consider, including the fact that if in the event of charges being filed against an officer, we don't want so much pretrial publicity that all of a sudden the case is moved to East Texas or North Texas or West Texas or some Texas that is not reflective of this big melting pot we call Houston, and it would take away the community's ability through a grand jury or a criminal jury to be able to weigh in and pass judgment on our actions. Because that would be an unintended consequence.
Right.
Chief, let me ask you, this is Dixon. You're in a very volatile business, and when you're in an environment like we're in now, where we've got 6 police shootings, and of course, everybody wants to see all the videotape to each one of those shootings. And let's talk about, for example, the shooting that took place on Scott Street a couple weeks ago, where you're dealing with the suspect particularly was holding a BB gun and the replica of the Beretta, the 9mm. And this case How do you process this from the law enforcement perspective, dealing with the officers, and uh, to ensure that the, the subject's rights were not violated, and that uh, the evidence you turn over to the district attorney's office is going to render a just and fair verdict? The public sees these incidents, and I got to tell you, there's indignation and anger wells up. Uh, how do you process that to ensure to the public that justice is going to be served?
You know, Bishop, that's a great question. And in that incident, you're kind of breaking up. So I think I was hearing you talking about the Scott Street incident with the gentleman with the Beretta replica 9mm Beretta BB gun. You know,
Right.
what we do is that we try to. First of all, people need to know that we go to every scene because I think it's important as a leader that that we can rely on a report, but we can actually go to the scene and look at the evidence ourselves. Look at the body worn camera ourselves. Look at the shell cases. Look at whatever is there. And I've been investigating officer-involved shootings since I was a young officer as an investigator. And so I've always said to myself as I went up the ranks, instead of relying on somebody else's report, I want to rely on my own eyes. So I think that, and it's not just me. I bring Troy Finner goes to the scenes. I mean, people that are not just police officers, but they're from this community. They were raised in this community, and they're pillars in this community. The second piece that I would say is that I try to describe what I've seen on the video, if we have video, so people can at least visualize what has happened. And the third piece is that when the criminal case is done, the DA is. I still believe that some families they should have some say, the family of the deceased subject. But once the DA's done with the case, and we know we're not going to jeopardize venue, which is my biggest concern, one of my biggest concerns, that we release everything, because the community, by and large, knows an unjust use of force when they see it, and they know a justified use of force when they see it. And when they see this young police officer, you know, I've got some questions on a couple of our incidents, and I'm not going to say which ones right now, because again, I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize an environment where if you fire an officer, you know that you're going to go to arbitration, and we know that in Texas, in some cases, it's a 50-50 proposition trying to keep officers off. Now, I've been very fortunate as a chief that when I fire someone, because I try to be clear in our expectations, consistent in our application of what our expectations are, that there's rarely been a case where I've what we call indefinitely suspended an officer that's appealed that I've lost. And I take great pride in that. I think it speaks to the integrity of our investigations, our processes. But when it's all done and folks see the actions of this young officer, they're going to be able to make their own assessment. And I would encourage the DA, as she takes these cases to grand jury, if there is not an indictment, if there's no true bill, that she release transcripts so people can see what witnesses had to say, and to have that transparency so people can know. I don't like the grand jury process too much because it's so secretive that people don't realize, having been called in front of a grand juries in the past as a police chief, those grand jurors take their role very seriously, and they ask you the tough questions. But nobody knows that if we don't make it a transparent process.
Chief Acevedo, thank you for joining us. I have a question. I know today you did a press conference prior to joining us, speaking about what took place in Minneapolis to Houston native George Floyd, who was brutally murdered with the knee in his neck. Some comments that have come in today and messages, they've all alluded to the same thing. How is it that you can have conversations about things outside of Houston, but with the things that are happening in Houston, you're, for lack of better words, dismissive of it because it's under investigation? Aren't these cases under investigation as well that are outside of our area?
Well, the chief there, Chief Menderes, is a friend and colleague I've known for a long time. He's already terminated those officers, so I know their investigation from an administrative standpoint is complete. And I think that tape is very, very clear. I don't see how you defend it. I don't see how you justify it. And I'm heartened by the fact that police chiefs across the country are speaking out, which is, I think that for Nicholas and for Reverend Dixon and a lot of folks at the NAACP, they would say that 20, 25 years ago, you would not have seen police chiefs speaking out. Having said that, and I said this in my press conference, I don't know the rules in terms of the 143 of the government code here that we have to follow, or collective bargaining agreements. We would never be able to fire somebody in 24 hours like they did there, because we have a different set of rules and laws we have to follow. And so again, I have to, if you go and look at our videos after we finished our investigation on the Harding Street, I think I was pretty strong on my condemnation of former Officer Goins and his partner that were both charged. And, I take exception to people that think that when the timing is right, I'm going to call the balls and the strikes. And at the end of the day, like I said on the Nicholas Chavez incident, where I just told me a few minutes ago, I've already reviewed a lot of the videos from that. The most, I would say, the most egregious part in terms of questions is already public on that video that was taken on a cell phone. So what would be served if, and I've already made it real clear that it was hard to watch. It was kind of almost shocking to watch. I've said that publicly on one of our own cases. But what would be served by releasing everything now and jeopardizing a case that's still not complete? And I think at the end of the day, that's why we're being a little hesitant to say anything more.
Chief, let me dive in here one second on this, because you made a point very diplomatically that I think is a salient point that perhaps needs a bit more clarity, if I can push a little bit. When you talk about the possibility of risking a change of venue in some of these cases.
Can you all, for some reason on my end, Bishop Dixon, you're completely broken up on my end. I don't know if that's just on my end.
Is this better?
Yes. Okay, very clear.
Thank you so much. You've made a point multiple times about being careful and cautious not to handle a case in such a way that you cause a change of venue by releasing tape prematurely and that sort of thing. And you made it diplomatically, but I think it's a salient point that perhaps needs a bit more clarity. When you talk about risking change of venue, for example, in either of these cases, a case getting moved from Houston, Harris County to somewhere rural in East Texas or some other place where the demographics are different and the jury would be made up of a different set of demographics. Talk about that just a little bit more. I know it's delicate, but I think it needs to be explained and made clear.
Yeah, Bishop, I think I think you're talking about why I put so much value in trying to make sure we don't lose venue on any of our cases. And I think is because it's the people of Houston that we serve. It's the people of this city that we serve. And this is a very unique city. We're the most diverse city in this nation, which I think makes us the most diverse city on planet Earth. And so I believe that it's really important to protect our investigation and make sure we never do anything that all of a sudden a case that turns into criminal charges ends up, we've already had a case, and I won't even say the name of the case, where a lawyer talked about change of venue already. And I'm not even going to say what case it was. And none of these ongoing cases right now. And I'll never forget in Austin, Texas, when we suffered the loss of David Joseph Jr., who was a 17-year-old young man, African American, totally naked, unarmed, and one of our officers that happened to be African American as well. I only bring in race because it seems like that's a big part of the conversation across the country as it relates to the disproportionality of bad police shootings or uses of force as it relates to communities of color and poor communities, including some poor white folks. But I'll never forget that my activists, my Young Black Lives Matter activists, Austin Justice Coalition, Measure Austin, all my activists, we had a press conference, and this was in the summer where we were having a lot of problems across the country, and the 5 Dallas officers that were shot. I mean, we had a really bad set of issues across our country. And I remember I brought them in and I talked to them and I said, look, guys, if there's charges on this where we killed this young man without a scratch on the officer, right? And his first instinct for a naked kid in the middle of the street is to come out with his gun, and his next instinct after he gets his attention and David Joseph Jr. runs full speed to him is to just shoot him twice like it's a rabid dog, and there's a change of venue. People are going to be really upset if all of a sudden it goes to a community that's not reflective of our community and the officer gets out. And so I know that I just want people to know that that's really important to us. And it's really important to me because I want our community to be able to ultimately weigh in as to through the grand jury process, and if charges are filed through the jury trial process, weigh in and render judgment. I think we owe it to our community because this is the community we serve.
Thank you for that. That was, I think that was important for you to express that. I know you have a long career in law enforcement. You're Cuban native of Cuba. I'm
one of those bad hombres that people
started off with California Highway Patrol. And as I read that, I was thinking, I used to watch Chips growing up, and I know you rose to chief there. So you have a lot of experience and you've seen a lot. With what we've seen these past, I would say, 6 weeks here in Houston. I know the city of Houston has had over 20 police shootings in 2020. But these last couple of weeks, we've had basically about one a week, with the exception of 1 week. We had one on May 14th with another one on May 16th. So a Thursday and
like in 2019.
Huh?
2019, right?
No, I'm talking about now.
Yeah. Okay.
This 2020.
Okay.
So we had a shooting, Rayshard Scales on the 16th, followed by the shooting on that Saturday at Walgreens where the man stabbed and killed, fatally stabbed the 80-some-year-old woman.
Rosalie Cook.
That we haven't really addressed is around that same time, there was a man named Joshua Kelsey who went to 4 locations, or 3 locations, shooting 4 people, fatally 3, but he was taken alive.
Yeah.
And so what we see is, how we feel is that a white person can go around shooting up people. A Black person could just be not following commands, or what people like to say, being non-compliant. And one lives for due process and one doesn't get that. They get a casket. What do you say to the community when the trust isn't as strong as it should be with law enforcement, because we can see it clearly like that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the Charleston shooter that went into an AME church, and because I remember hearing that from community members that killed a bunch of worshipers there, and he was a white male and ends up taken into custody. Look, I understand the sentiment. I understand how people feel, but I assure you, and we're not going to go out and put out every time that we arrest murder suspects and people that have committed really bad crime that are people of color that also are taken into custody without any use of force. I remember in Austin, we had a guy go rob a beauty supply store off of at the Target up there in the Triangle, whatever that was called, up there north of the city. shoots at the armored car driver, takes his money, takes his gun. The lady at the register that was working the store screams, shoots at her. A citizen sees it all, starts following him, a resident, calls 911. We follow him, we go in pursuit. He gets out of his car, shooting at our cops. And this is a person of color, African-American man. Our officers return, one of our officers gets shot. Well, he gets away, but the guy's silly enough to go back to his own house. And we were able to track him down within an hour and a half. And he was taken into custody. Here's a guy that shot a cop, shot him. So I get the sentiment, but I think that what we have to do in our police department and law enforcement is we can't just show the bad outcomes. We also have to show all the times that we are doing the right thing. And I'm not sure we do enough of that. Just to add into context when we fall short. Okay, they have fallen short X number of times, but how many times are we getting things right? And I think that that's part of the thing that we have to do better, us as a police department. For example, right now with this COVID, I mean, violent crime murders are up 50%. There's something, I mean, people are out of jobs. There's nerves are afraid. There's a lot going on. Our mental health calls are up. People in crisis are up. And yet most of those cases we're handling well, but we're not bringing those to the surface. So one of the things I've told my team is if we only show when we do wrong, it's going to make the community feel that we're always doing wrong. We have to balance that to show all the times that we do things right, including when we're dealing with communities of color and poor communities and mentally ill. And there's a lot of good police work going on that doesn't justify bad police work, doesn't justify the bad outcomes, but it does add perspective as to how prevalent it is. And I still would say that good policing, I think most people would agree, far outweighs the bad policing. We need to just do a better job of holding bad policing accountable, but we also have to do a better job of lifting up good police officers, not only in prayer, but also showcasing their good work. And I think that's part of the problem.
Chief,
Question.
Chief, let me ask, since you've been in charge of the police department here in Houston, when you came in, I'm sure you made an assessment as to what things were like and have made some changes. Tell us, what fundamental changes have you made within the Houston Police Department that you believe has made it significantly better, that's made the city safer, and has made law enforcement more fair to predominantly minority communities?
Yeah, Pastor, Bishop, I want to try to repeat the question. I think you wanted it to be to talk about what, because you are breaking up on my end again. I don't know what it is. With this weather, probably. I think you were asking about what we've done, what I've done as a chief to make the department better and the community safer. Some of the things we've done that should help hopefully build that trust here in the city. Is
correct?
That capture it?
Yes. And yes.
Well, let me just start. Number one, we've set our expectations really high with our department. As a matter of fact, today I actually met with our training staff about Mr. Floyd's death in Minneapolis and talked to them about, if anyone here thinks it's okay to put your knee on the neck of an individual, let me know right now. Because I don't care what your credentials are. I'm the police chief. I'm telling you right now, that is unacceptable, which is against our policy. But we've done is we've actually changed the way that we investigate officer-involved use of force. We used to have homicide do it, but the problem is that not every homicide detective is probably that set on, let me go investigate police officer shootings. So we created our special investigations unit that the DA has actually called a model for the county, which is assigned to the homicide division in terms of the commander and the chief, but actually it's a specialized unit that works officer-involved incidents. And consequently, what's happened in the last 3 years that I've been here, we've actually had 3 officers that I can think of off the top of my head charged out of use of force incidents. 2 out of a shooting and this is outside of the Harding Street case. 2 out of officer-involved shootings and 1 out of a use of force with the taser. And so, in talking to our DA, she's told me that for many years that all shootings, there was hardly ever a shooting that was found out of policy. So we've changed that, and our officers know our expectations. We set an expectation that the truth shall set you free one way or the other. But if you lie, you die. Go ask any police officer what's the chief says about lying, and they know if you lie, you die. If they don't tell you that, I need their name, but tell me, because I will buy you lunch if they don't tell you if you lie, you die. And the reason I need their names, I want to make sure what they're not watching is I put out those videos. The other thing that we've done that I think is really important, that's the accountability piece, right? Is the piece about the way we investigate crimes in the first place. You know, when I got here in 2016, I remember I was out with my family on New Year's Day, and I remember a shooting that occurred on MLK, and I can't remember the cross off the top of my head right now. MLK and Reed, all right, MLK and Reed. A guy's at a red light in the left turn lane. Here comes another guy, opens the door and just shoots a bunch of rounds. The guy shot 6 times. Well, the guy's very fortunate. He lives. So I show up with my family and I'm looking, and I see like a 2-year officer collecting casings. I'm like, what are you doing? He said, well, Chief, I'm collecting the evidence. I go, where are the detectives? And they told me, well, unless somebody dies, we don't send detectives to these scenes. And I went back to my team and I said, I'd only been here a month. I said, I've already determined that we got a lot of people working bankers hours in this city, in this department. They're working Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 8 to 4, 9 to 5. But crime doesn't take off at 5 o'clock. It doesn't go, criminals don't take the weekends off, and they don't celebrate holidays and take them off, and neither are we. And effective immediately, we're creating a major assaults unit that will investigate crime. Now, and I said, let me ask you a question. What message does that send to the victim of the family, the victim's families? And I don't care if he's the biggest gang member in the world or a straight A student. That's somebody's family member. That person is loved by somebody. What message does it send to them when we don't even bother sending an investigator? And so as a result of changing the way that we approach the investigation of these violence, we ended up making arrests that wouldn't have happened in the past. And so I can get into the community policing aspect in terms of what we're doing with our youth. It is so important. Building our partnerships with the HISD, that's so important. Building our partnerships with Parks and Rec through the PAL program, that's so important. But here's the one thing I know, Pastor. The enemy is alive and well, and that's Satan. And I'm a person of faith. And I know he's working double time to tear down trust between communities, between faiths, between churches, and between law enforcement and the communities that need us most. And so we've got to work twice as hard to build relationships and to overcome what's going on in the world, because it is a crazy time that we're living in, not just here, but across our nation.
Thank you for that. I think Bishop probably got a call because he stepped out of the studio. But I do see a question here from our production team. So I guess this is a comment that came in. How often are officers evaluated and tested for mental stability after onboarding? And what is their ability to make judgment calls under pressure? So I guess making mental health calls under pressure. I know we have a CERT team?
So we have a team that actually we are learning. This agency, long before I got here, it became a learning location where the Department of Justice sends police teams from around the country and other service providers to look at how we do our mental health. I've got to commend Chief Wendy Bainbridge and her team. They've done a phenomenal job. But the truth is that what we've done in terms of our department is twofold. One, we've increased our we're thankful for the mayor who just authorized. Hi, Pastor. Additional psychologists on staff. We've increased our our peer support program, our chaplain program, all of our mental health programs. And so what
I
we
can't get them at all.
am I hearing? Is that you, Bishop? Are you there? What we do is we actually have our people go through all these programs that are robust, and quite frankly, we've increased them in the last couple of years. But the work never ends. Every time our officers are involved in a critical incident, they have to go see the psychologist. They have to be evaluated by a psychologist, and most importantly, we're doing a lot of the debriefings, not just but for critical incidents, but in terms of officer-involved shootings, but other critical incidents, and a lot of the trauma that can build up, the emotional trauma that can build up and scar some of our folks throughout a career. And so we have processes to actually identify that trauma that might be impacting someone's behavior, and hopefully intervene before it manifests in self behavior that leads to them being fired. I saw somebody I can see the private chat over here talking about the discipline process that the union, gets it's set up for the union can just get everybody back. And when I got to Texas in July of 07 to Austin, I was told that when you fire somebody, it's a 50-50 chance of bringing up that they'll end up back. I'm proud to say that, because we're very clear in our expectations and we try to be consistent in the application of the expectations, that it's been rare that we've lost an appeal of someone that's been fired. And I think that's because we make expectations clear, we apply the standards the same, and we testify in every single case, or in the vast majority. Every once in a great while I'm not available, but I would say in the very, very vast majority of the cases I testify in the hearings with the hearing examiner. I think that has a tremendous impact.
Excellent. And Chief, I have a question also that was asked from one of the people this is online as well. I guess they were asking about, I know your department operates under general orders, and they were asking a question about why were some of the general orders possibly redacted?
Yeah. A couple of the ones that are redacted, by the way, I think that we just started posting all of our stuff because of our technology. We hadn't been doing that. We wanted to make it available to the public, because transparency, again, is important to the greatest extent possible. We want to do that. But some of the tactical type tactics end up being redacted. And we actually just finished doing a review not too long ago, another review on the redactions. I think we might have unredacted some of the stuff that had previously been redacted. But generally speaking, if it's tactical, some of that may be redacted. Otherwise, the general order should all be public.
Thank you for that, Chief. I see that Nicholas is buffering right now, and it's just you and I. I'm waiting for Bishop to come back in. Another question that we have of concern deals with domestic violence. And we've asked this of everyone who's been on today. We know last weekend we saw Houston Fire Department captain take his girlfriend's life as well as his life. We know domestic violence is on the rise, especially during this pandemic. What are you seeing what are your officers reporting back, and what actions are being taken to kind of curb that, if at all? And what resources are available for those who are facing that?
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad that domestic violence continues to be one of the driver of homicides in our city and in many cities across the country. And we've actually seen an increase in domestic violence here in our city, especially during this shutdown. Did I just lose everybody during the shutdown?
I'm here. I just wanted screen for you. I just made it full screen for you. Production made it full screen.
I'm looking at myself. I thought I'd lost you.
Well, I'll say facial reaction.
I like looking at you instead of myself.
Girl.
We saw that. We've seen an increase during domestic violence incidents here during the COVID shutdown. And so the most important thing for the community to know is that COVID has not stopped the department from being fully operational. It has not stopped the Houston Area Women's Center from being fully operational, and other partners. We can bring ladies to safety and families to safety, placing them in the center and other shelters. And so please don't think just because COVID's going on, we can't find folks help. Now, let me tell you something that I noticed when I first got here, when I going on patrol. It seemed to me like we were getting a lot of, I don't know if the public realizes that before officers make arrests in this county, it's a very unique circumstance. We have to call the district attorney's intake desk, and they have to accept charges. Mm-hmm. Where in most cities, if not all in Texas and across the country, police officers, if they have probable cause for an arrest, they make the arrest, they write the report, they book the person, they write the report, they submit it to the DA, and then the DA either continues with the case, or they drop charges, or they do what they do. So what I felt was that we were going to allow domestic violence calls, but arrests weren't being made.
No teeth.
And that, can you hear me?
I was saying, so no teeth in it.
And that concerned me. And so, because the one thing that is important is that you can't help a family if there's no intervention. And I always tell folks that, just because somebody gets arrested on a domestic violence case, depending on the circumstances, doesn't mean you go to prison, but maybe that's something that can be used to get people into counseling, to get people into therapy, to get people in substance abuse, and whatever the issues are that may be some of the underlying causes. And so what I did is we instituted a policy that when we went to a domestic violence call, that if the DA didn't accept charges, a Houston police sergeant had to respond to the scene, actually assess the case, and actually contact the DA's office. What do you think happened to arrests? They went up. And I'm not happy because we made more arrests, but that we know that if it's a driver of homicides, we know that at least on that night, no one died, that that family was not victimized by a violent person. And we hope that it will help us reduce the incidents of domestic violence murders, like we had with that beautiful young woman that was 7 months pregnant not too long ago, I think like last week, and her ex-boyfriend broke in and killed her, and her 7-month-old fetus died, shot her mom, shot her sister, found her new boyfriend, shot him, and then took his own life when he was surrounded by SWAT inside his uncle's truck. But the arrests went up, and I think the reason for that was that in some cases, the DA, instead of looking for probable cause, maybe wanted to get a case that was beyond a reasonable doubt, like they're in a jury trial. And in some cases, maybe the officers weren't providing all the relevant facts to make the case. Because keep in mind, we're a pretty young department, a lot of retirements, and there's a lot of inexperience out there. And so we need to have more supervisory involvement.
Thank you for that, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
Trying to get Bishop Dixon back in, so I'm kind of multitasking with the production team. I know a question that Bishop was going to ask you about, because he's asked others, is about trafficking. We know Houston is a hotbed for trafficking. And what is it looking like right now during this pandemic? We've been told that it's been steadily going. What actions are being taken around human and sex trafficking here in Houston? And what are some of the things that we as citizens can look out for in terms of helping, I guess, to combat those things?
Well, let me say that for us, we have a very strong human trafficking unit. They do some phenomenal work, and we've got some great partners in across the city and the county, and our partners at the Sheriff's Department and Precinct 1 and the other precincts, and everyone's working together to combat the scourge. The first thing that makes me proud of Houston is that we don't deny that we have a problem. We're not in denial. We actually acknowledge it. The mayor acknowledges it, and we're working with many stakeholders to combat it. The second thing that makes me proud is that we've started to treat the women that are being trafficked as victims instead of as criminals, and start to put a greater focus on the actual traffickers and on the pimps. That if you go down Bissonnette and you talk to some of these young women, you can see that they've got bruising in their eye, around their eyes from being beaten. And so I think that as a result of changing our approach and our mindset, we're starting to see results. Having said that, it is still going on. It doesn't just happen with poor girls in poor neighborhoods. It happens to middle class families. It can happen to anyone. And so it's important for parents to be really involved and paying attention to who their kids are talking to. Try to keep the computer or their phones in the chat rooms. See who they're chatting with. These people are very good at trying to seduce young women and young boys out of the home, and they think they're going to go meet a 15-year-old, and what they're meeting is a 25-year-old man or a woman or 30-year-old or 40-year-old that's going to force them into prostitution. If you see a lot of traffic in and out of a house, and a lot of young women coming and going, be a nosy neighbor and report that so we can look into it as a law enforcement community with our partners and try to intervene and try to get these young people home where they belong. And so the work continues. We've got great partners, but our number one force multiplier ultimately is the actual community itself, and we need their help.
Thank you for that. Now, we're still trying to get Bishop in, so I do apologize. I know there's been talk about the numbers. I know that your force is understaffed. I understand there's a need for to double your size. You have about 5,000 officers presently.
We're at about 5,300 police officers for a city of 671 square miles. Our overtime budget is allotted budget is about $7 million. Now compare that, and this city is about 2.4 million people. Compare that to Chicago, who has 13,000 police officers for a city of 248 square miles or so, with 13,000 police officers. And according to their former superintendent, last year the overtime budget was 140 million.
Okay.
Compare that to where we're at. So we're very lean as an organ. Hi, Bishop. Hey, I can see you now.
Hey, now y'all can see me finally.
Yes, sir. How are you? It's great to see you.
Good evening, Chief. Let's start all over again.
Yeah.
No.
Mama, you've been looking now. Mama's been calling. She said, "Where you at?"
I've been trying to get on, man.
Pastor, good to see you, Bishop.
Always great to see you, Chief. July, we about ready for the final question?
Well, he was answering about the understaffing, and then I'm gonna let you take the next question, Chief. I mean, Bishop.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Chief.
You lost me. What happened?
So I was saying, go ahead and finish talking about being understaffed. You're at about 5,300.
We are at 5,200 officers. I know the mayor is working really hard to try to restore some of those class cadet classes that we've lost. One that was supposed to have started in June, and we lost 5 for the next fiscal year. But I know he's working hard trying to find the funding, because what was interesting to especially young activists that think that communities of color don't support having a police presence, when they actually go door to door and actually in person interact with the community, they find out that they don't mind a police presence as long as it's good professional policing, and they want to, and communities want to live in safety, and so we're hopeful that the mayor will be able to restore that, because we've got to do better. I mean, homicide's up almost 50% year to date, and that really worries me. Violent crime is up, and the tough part is that we're starting to see that starting to happen in a lot of the big cities. Violent crime is starting to go up. And by violent crime, look, we've got so much to work to do still in criminal justice reform. Bishop Dixon knows about John Whitmire. I think he's well known to this community, Senator John Whitmire, who's a friend and mentor. and I think he's a mutual friend of many of us. I had him on patrol with me on my first night here, my first New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2016. I had this young officer driving us because I didn't know the city yet. I now can work patrol on my own, but that night I didn't because it's only been a month. And we stopped this young man, probably in his mid 30s, New Year's Eve. And I'm just going to tell you, he's a person of color. He opens the door. He's in his work uniform, which tells me this man, he's employed. That's a good thing. So he checks a rock of a controlled substance, right? Tries to check it. The officer sees it, grabs it. You know, it's a felony, right? And so we go to book him. I go open the door to look at the car because we can't leave it there. The next thing you know, you don't want it to come back, and it's on blocks with the wheels gone and stuff. And I see a picture of a beautiful young son, probably about 9 years old. And I looked at Senator Whitmire. I said, how have we made society safer? By taking this guy who's got a job, may have a little addiction problem, but it's managed well enough to at least he's got a job. We're taking him, putting him in jail, probably for the weekend. And if he can't make bail, because I do believe in bail reform, smart bail reform, measured bail reform, appropriate bail reform. He loses his job, loses his car. Then he comes out, and maybe he gets his wife gets angry at him, and now he puts hands on her, and it spirals. How have we made the community safer? To me, we got a lot of work to do, and that's one of the areas where a guy's got an addiction. Let's deal with the addiction. On the flip side of the coin, when an addiction or mental illness leads to violence and violent behavior, we got to deal with that too, because ultimately the communities that are being impacted the most by violence, it is not the rich communities, it's communities that are poor and disproportionate. Those are community of color and poor communities, and I think, again, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Everybody's muted.
Unmute Bishop Dixon. Unmute yourself. Unmute your mic. There you go.
Hear me now?
Hear you.
Very good. Let me thank you very much for all of the substantive answers, and thank you, July, for hosting this very important conversation today, and thank you, Nicholas, as well. Chief, let me wrap up with this. Community policing, community-oriented policing is something, a phrase and a term that we've heard about and learned about over the years, and you've implemented quite a few principles that really brings the community and the police together. I want to ask, beyond COVID-19, we'd like to have the NAACP host a forum on community and police relations to specifically talk about what an interaction between the police and an individual on the streets should look like. How do we begin to really move beyond confrontational experiences on the streets? It seems to me that dialogue and that discussion needs to be had. We need to videotape those sessions so that we can reteach and reteach and reteach to educate both police as well as to educate the community, so that those 5 minutes of confrontation, if we can avoid confrontation in those 5 minutes at the scene, people can go home to their families. Police can go home to theirs, and the citizens can go home to their families. Would you speak to the need for that? We believe it's a great need, and we would love to partner with you to put that together.
Bishop, you were broken up a lot, but I got bits and pieces, and I think it's about once we get through this COVID, because obviously technology sometimes is not the best. Having forums with the NAACP, hosted by the NAACP, about police interactions, the do's and don'ts for the police should be thinking about for their own action, and community members should be thinking about, so we can all be safe and talk about those issues. And I think you've known me long enough, since the day we met at a Senate hearing, we are all in. Let's just pray to get that virus, that shot that we need, that vaccine, so we can get it sooner rather than later, Bishop, because I cannot wait to break bread with you in person and with a lot of other community members. This lack of connecting in person is really putting us behind. Not to mention the kids in school. They're getting behind, I believe, by not having school. So as soon as it's over, count on us. We're there. And in the interim, anything you need, please let us know. We're here.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you very much, Eli and Nicholas.
Thank you, Chief, for joining us. Everyone who stopped by today. We do this every Wednesday at 4:30. This week was law enforcement. Chief, I know we're going to have to bring you back again to touch on some other things, but we felt like it was important. You know, Nick's been working on this for a couple of weeks now, trying to get everyone coordinated, and then we do it in the middle of a tornado watch.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch the lightning up here from the 16th floor of police headquarters. It was a pretty interesting storm.
But we lost our original link due to a power outage. So we're just happy that we're able to do this. We do want to assure you that the community wants policing. We want smart policing. We want community policing. And we want to have this open communication between not just the NAACP, but all citizens should be able to talk to you. One last thing before you go, about when, this is another thing that production just gave, when when citizens have issues with law enforcement, I know they can submit reports. How often is that happening? Do citizens need to become more aggressive and more active in doing that?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we believe that if we complain, nothing's going to come of it. So people are, when they feel like they've been mistreated or not treated fairly, or we've fallen short, will not complain because they don't think anything's going to happen. And when we do that, bad policing wins and we all lose, including good police officers, because most of our complaints and most of our discipline, including firings and suspensions, are from internal complaints that are initiated by police officers complaining on things they see that are wrong, supervisors complaining with the things they see. But at the end of the day, the biggest force multiplier, whether it's standing up to criminals or standing up to police, to bad policing, is the community. So we urge you to, when we fall short or an officer does not do the right thing, or if you don't understand something, a lot of times when a little explanation goes a long way, when people understand what's going on, that builds trust. Please reach out to us. Let us have an opportunity to investigate or to explain, because I think that communication gap, the more that we close it, the stronger we're going to be and the better outcomes. And the last thing I will say is that sometimes in human nature, we're quick to complain and condemn. It's almost like the way society is nowadays, but we're not quick to actually compliment one another. If an officer does well, let's hold the bad apples accountable, but let's lift up the good, because we don't want them to ever think it's an us against them mentality, and that the people only call when they're complaining. And I'm here to say, as the guy that gets to see every commendation and all the complaints, that the good still outweighs the bad, and that our community takes the time to lift up the good police officers, and many of us are doing a good job of holding us accountable. So God bless you all, and again, thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much, Chief. Be safe out there.
Thank you, Chief.
Take care.
Thanks. All right, Nick, I'm going to bring in Portia to give us some more of our announcements. So Portia will be joining you on screen.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to reiterate reiterate, I talked about earlier the mass distribution that's going on at the branch on Saturday at 12 p.m. It'll be drive up or walk up distribution for PPE. Also, like immediately following the end of our broadcast, so right when we get off, there's another town hall from the national office. So the COVID-19 Unmuted Virtual Town Hall Series. This one is on education. So it's called Books, Ballots, and Books. You can RSVP right now by calling or going to the NAACP national page at naacp.org, or you can dial in at 866-757-0756 and join that. It's literally going live in the next 12 minutes. So encourage you to do that. Also, we've continuously talked about food distribution. So as all of our guests today alluded to, people are need resources, just some of the bare minimums. So the Church Without Walls is hosting a food and mass distribution. It'll be this Friday and next Friday. And that's from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. That's drive-through with the Houston Food Bank. And that is located from the Queenston campus of the church. And that's 5527 Queenston Boulevard in Houston, over on the northwest side of the city. And then Windsor Village is still doing distributions. They'll have one more as of right now tomorrow from 3 to 6 at the Power Center. And that's located at 12401 South Post Oak. And then one last one, Target Hunger is doing another distribution with City Councilwoman from District A, Amy Peck. And that's going to be on Thursday, June 4th. So that's next week at the Carverdale Community Center. And that's located at 9920 Puerto Rico Road. And that's in partnership with the United Way and Target Hunger. So that's what we have going on. And as always, I want to remind everyone to do their census. Census 2020, you can go and fill it out. It takes you 5 to 7 minutes to fill it out so that we can be counted and make sure our resources are allocated correctly for the state of Texas and also here in Harris County and Houston. And last but certainly not least, we do have an election coming up, a runoff election from the primaries that took place in March. And that election is on July 14th. Early voting for that starts on June 29th and goes through July 2nd. And then again, it's from July 5th through the 10th. And the last day to register to vote is June 15th. We'll be having some information sent out via email. If you're a member of the NAACP, we're partnering with Move Texas to send out some information to help you get registered to vote prior to that deadline. And additionally, we'll have a show coming up focused on voting as well. So if you are not registered to vote, I encourage you to go and register. You can download an app at the Secretary of State or at the Harris County Clerk's website. If you have access to a printer, you can download it and print it and mail it in. Or if you go over to Move Texas's website, they have a tracking where you can request a ballot and they'll send it, request a voter registration card and they'll send it to you with the prepaid postage. So those are all the announcements I have. Just like I said, encourage you to do your census, get registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, go to, if you're interested in joining the organization, of course, you can go to the naacphouston.org and join us. Or if you're interested in joining, if you're not here in Houston and you want to join the fight for social justice with the rest of us with NAACP, you can go to the naacp.org website and log in and get on there and become a member. We need you. There's strength in numbers. We need more activists and more voices to make sure that the injustices are pushed up against and that we're able to move the needle forward. So July, that's all I have. There you go.
Thank you, Portia, for those announcements. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you to all of our guests and for our moderator today, our chair of our Criminal Justice Committee, Bishop James Dixon Jr. We thank you, Bishop Dixon or Dr. Dixon, for joining us. And we thank everyone for being patient with us with the technology challenges that we had today. We pushed through. It was an important episode and we were able to pull it off. Please tune in back with us next Wednesday. Next Wednesday show will focus on domestic violence and trafficking. It will be a 2-hour special. So make sure that you tune back in for that. If you have any questions for us, you can always inbox the NAACP on our Houston homepage, the page that you're viewing this on now. And we just thank you. Please be safe, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.